Welcome to Horror Year, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you're brave enough to face your darkest fears and uncover the most chilling tales, you've come to the right place. So, dim the lights, turn up the volume, and subscribe to Horror Year. Your journey into terror begins now. Nestled deep in the woods in the small town of Darlington, stood an ancient edifice covered in ivy, Darlington College. The hostel's old brick walls held secrets older than any of the students who stayed there, creating a place where modernity and history collided. The hostel had a spooky vibe, and it was a huge structure that had formerly been a house. However, that added to the appeal for the majority of pupils. After summer break, Anya, a second-year student, couldn't wait to go back to the hostel. This year she was given a new room assignment, 309, which was nestled away in the remote corner of the third floor. Large windows in the dorm provided a view of the thick forest that surrounded the campus. The room was vast. It felt almost like a cathedral, with its towering ceiling and squeaky wooden floor. Anya found it rather pleasant despite its age, well, at least during the day. But her first night in the hotel was far from reassuring. Anya detected a strange coolness in the air as she became comfortable in her new surroundings. Even though it was late August, her room had the feel of being trapped in the dead of winter. With no concern, she covered herself with blankets and quickly fell asleep. A heavy thud startled her awake at 3 in the morning. Anya sat up in bed, heart racing, and listened. Apart from the occasional sound of the old building settling, the chamber was peaceful. She talked herself out of believing it to be nothing more than a book falling off the shelf. But then it happened again. And this time it was accompanied by a gentle shuffling sound that sounded like feet dragging on the floor. Anya looked around the dimly lit room, her breath stuck in her throat. Long shadows from the streetlight outside danced over the walls, making every corner seem like a possible hiding place for something unseen. She mustered the bravery to switch on the bedroom lamp, filling the space with a cozy warmth. Nothing appeared to be out of place. There were no books strewn around, no weird objects to be seen, and the floor was empty. She turned off the light and shook her head, putting it down to an overactive imagination. She heard a faint whisper as she reclined. It was close to her ear, gentle and wind-like. "Get out." Anya felt her blood freeze. With wide eyes in the darkness, she leaped to her feet. Once more, she reached for the lamp, but before she could turn it on, the bulb flickered and died. Anxiety swept through her. She reached for her phone and scanned the room in the low light of the screen. Nobody was present. Anya attempted to dismiss the encounter as a terrible dream the following morning, but the discomfort persisted. She heard 2 girls discussing room 309 as she downed a breakfast. One female muttered, "Did you hear someone got assigned to it this year?" "Yes, poor thing." "Is she unaware of the story?" The other person answered. Anya felt her heart skip a beat. She hesitated before approaching them. "Excuse me, what story?" The females looked at each other. One of them said, her voice tinged with sympathy, "You're in room 309. Anya said, "Yes," her throat becoming parched. With a sigh, the girl said, "A few years ago, there was a student who resided there. She was, peculiar, remained solitary and had few friends. Although she was always talking to someone in her room, no one ever saw her companion. Then one day, she simply disappeared." The second girl said, "They never found her body. Some people think she's still in there, haunting the room." Anya's brow began to perspire icily. She tried to laugh uncomfortably to get rid of the feeling of impending doom. "That's just a story, right?" The females remained silent. All of them did was shrug and move on, leaving Anya standing by herself in the dining hall with a heavy feeling of foreboding hanging over her. Anya tried to concentrate on her studies that night, but her thoughts kept returning to what the girls had said. The shadows were longer and darker, and the room felt colder than before. Despite her best efforts to ignore the deafening silence, she couldn't help but jump at every crack in the floor and every rustle of the wind outside. She woke up again at 3 a.m. This time there was something in the air that was thick and heavy, an unfathomable presence. She sensed that there was someone or something else in the space with her. Her body was gripped by fear, and she dared not move. The whisper was then audible to her. "Get out." This time, it was louder and more forceful, as though the person or thing speaking was standing right next to her. As the room got cooler, Anya's heart began to accelerate. The chill was getting worse, and she could see her breath in the air, the warmth of her body evaporating. Her bed started to tremble, not in a violent way, but enough to make her go into complete terror. Once more, the whisper emerged from the other side of the space. "Get out!" Anya hurled the covers aside and hastily got out of bed, her heart thumping so intensely she was certain it might explode. Her hands shaking, she struggled with the lock on her phone and hurried to the door. A chilly hand touched her arm when she eventually wrenched the door open. When she saw that a group of night owls were studying in the common area, she let out a scream and took off running down the hallway. She looked up, and they were shocked to see her pale, trembling, and with wild eyes. That evening, she didn't go back to room 309. She asked for a different room the following morning, and the administration, while perplexed, complied without hesitation. Gradually, the terror subsided when Anya moved into a smaller, less remote room on the first level. However, room 309 stayed empty for the remainder of the year. Nobody else was tasked with handling it, and nobody ventured to approach it. When the hostel underwent renovations years later, room 309 was closed off and converted into a storage closet. From one student generation to the next, the tale of the girl who disappeared and the whispering in the night became just another folklore. However, those who had been through it, like Anya, knew the reality. Not everyone who enrolls at Darlington College leaves it behind, and there are some things that are best left alone. Some, like the girl who disappeared, stay there indefinitely, their murmurs resonating down the corridors as they wait for the next unfortunate person to choose to stay in room 309 despite the warnings.